The sun was dipping low in the sky, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood street. A woman in her late 20s walked slowly along the sidewalk, her hand resting lightly on the harness of her large German shepherd. The dog moved with calm precision, his ears alert, his body tense but controlled. He wasn't just any pet, he was a retired police K9, trained to protect and serve. And right now, his only job was to guide his owner, who couldn't see the world around her but trusted him completely. They turned the corner, the sound of distant traffic humming in the background. The woman smiled slightly as she felt the dog adjust his pace, avoiding a crack in the pavement without needing a command. She had gotten him after he retired from the force, and though he was no longer chasing criminals, his instincts were as sharp as ever. Then, the roar of an engine shattered the peace. A motorcycle came speeding down the street, the rider weaving recklessly between lanes. The noise startled the dog, but he held his ground, until the bike swerved too close. The rider, a rough-looking man in a leather jacket, didn't seem to care. He glared at them as he passed, muttering something under his breath. The woman tensed but kept walking. She was used to people being impatient around her. But what happened next made her blood run cold. The biker suddenly braked hard, skidding to a stop a few feet ahead. He turned, his boots scraping against the pavement as he stomped toward them. The dog immediately stepped in front of his owner, his body rigid, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "Control your mutt," the biker snapped, his voice thick with anger. The woman's grip on the harness tightened. "He's a service dog," she said firmly. "Please just leave us alone." The biker didn't listen. In one swift motion, he drew back his leg and kicked the dog hard in the ribs. A sharp yelp cut through the air. The woman gasped, dropping to her knees, her hands frantically searching for her dog. The German shepherd staggered but didn't back down. His training kicked in, pain was nothing new. He planted himself between his owner and the threat, teeth bared, his entire body coiled like a spring. The biker laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Yeah, run along, mutt. Before I..." But he never finished his sentence. From the other end of the street, a car screeched to a halt. A man in his 40s jumped out, his face dark with fury. He had seen everything. "You've got 3 seconds to walk away," the newcomer said, his voice deadly calm. The biker scoffed. "Or what? You gonna call the cops?" The man didn't blink. "No. But he might." He pointed at the dog. The biker frowned, finally taking a proper look at the German shepherd. Then his eyes landed on the faded badge still visible on the dog's collar. His face went pale. Recognition hit him like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just any dog. This was a retired police K9. And the biker had just assaulted him in broad daylight. The biker's sneer melted into something else, fear. His eyes darted between the dog, the woman on the ground, and the man who had just stepped in. The German shepherd hadn't backed down. His ears were flat against his skull, his teeth still bared, the deep growl in his chest like a warning from a storm about to break. The man who had gotten out of the car moved closer, his hands clenched into fists. He wasn't huge, but there was something in his stance, like he knew how to handle himself. "You're real tough, huh?" he said, voice low. "Kicking a blind woman's dog?" The biker took a step back, his bravado crumbling. "I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" The man cut him off. "That it's a crime to attack a service animal? Or that this dog's got more honor in his paw than you've got in your whole body?" A few neighbors had started to gather, drawn by the commotion. Someone was already on their phone, probably filming. The biker's face twisted, part anger, part panic. He glanced at his bike, calculating his escape. But the dog blocked his path. The woman, still kneeling, ran her hands over her dog's side, checking for injuries. "Are you okay, boy?" she whispered. The dog flicked his ears toward her but didn't take his eyes off the biker. His ribs would bruise, but he wasn't backing down. Not while his owner was still in danger. The biker swallowed hard. "Look, I didn't mean." "Save it," the man from the car snapped. He pulled out his own phone. "We'll let the cops sort it out." That was when the biker made his second mistake. Instead of staying put, he lunged, not at the dog, not at the woman, but at the man with the phone. He swung wildly, a sloppy punch that missed completely. The man dodged easily, but before he could react, the German Shepherd moved. Like a shadow with teeth, the dog lunged forward, clamping his jaws around the biker's wrist, not biting down hard, but holding. A warning. The biker froze, his breath coming in short, panicked bursts. "He's trained to disarm suspects," the woman said quietly, standing now, her voice steady despite the shaking in her hands. "If you struggle, he will take you down." The biker went still. The dog's grip was firm, unyielding. One wrong move, and those teeth would go from restraint to force. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the cops. The man from the car kept his eyes locked on the biker. "You picked the wrong dog to mess with, pal." The biker's face was pale. I didn't know he was a cop dog." "Doesn't matter what he was," the woman said, her voice sharp. "He's my dog now. And you hurt him." The sound of the sirens grew louder. The biker's fate was sealed. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the tension like a knife. The biker's eyes darted around, looking for any way out, but the dog held firm, his grip on the man's wrist unshakable. The woman stood tall now, one hand resting on her dog's back, her face set in quiet fury. A police cruiser skidded to a stop beside them, lights flashing. Two officers stepped out, their expressions shifting from routine alert to sharp focus as they took in the scene: the terrified biker, the protective German Shepherd, the blind woman with her jaw clenched in anger. The first officer, a broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense stance, stepped forward. "What's going on here?" The man from the car spoke up. "This guy kicked her service dog, hard. Then tried to swing at me when I stepped in." He nodded toward the dog. "Turns out, the dog's a retired K9. Handled things himself after that." The officer's gaze snapped to the biker, then to the dog, and recognition flickered in his eyes. "Wait. Rex?" The German Shepherd's ears twitched at the name, but he didn't release his hold. The woman nodded. "Yeah. He was with the K9 unit for 6 years before he retired. Now he's with me." The second officer, a younger woman with a tight ponytail, let out a low whistle. "You're lucky he didn't put you on the ground, pal." She stepped closer to the biker, her voice turning hard. "You know assaulting a service animal is a felony, right?" The biker's face went even paler. "I didn't know it was a cop dog. I thought it was some mutt in my way." The first officer's expression darkened. "Doesn't matter if he was a stray or a show dog. You don't kick an animal. And you definitely don't mess with a blind person's lifeline." He reached for his cuffs. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." The biker started to protest, but the dog gave a low, warning growl, and he immediately shut up. As the officer cuffed him, the German Shepherd finally released his wrist, stepping back to press against his owner's leg. The second officer crouched in front of the dog, running gentle hands over his ribs. "He okay?" The woman nodded, though her voice wavered slightly. "He's tough. But he'll need to be checked." The officer stood, turning to the biker with a glare. "You're looking at criminal charges, animal cruelty, assault on a service animal, possibly even attempted assault on this man here." She jerked her chin toward the bystander who had intervened. "And given this dog's history? The department does not take this lightly." The biker's bravado was long gone. His shoulders slumped as the reality of his situation crashed down on him. I didn't think." That's the problem, the first officer cut in. You didn't think at all. As they led the biker to the cruiser, the woman knelt beside her dog again, burying her fingers in his fur. Good boy, she whispered, her voice thick. You're such a good boy. The dog leaned into her, his tail giving a single, slow wag. The man from the car watched them for a moment before speaking. You need anything? A ride? Vet? She shook her head. Thank you, for stepping in. But we'll be okay. He nodded, then glanced at the police. They'll need your statement. And his records, proof he's a retired K9. It'll make the charges stick. She exhaled, squaring her shoulders. Good. Because no one hurt her dog and walked away. And this time, the law was on their side. The police station buzzed with the usual low hum of activity, phones ringing, officers typing reports, the occasional burst of radio chatter. But in the interrogation room, the air was thick with tension. The biker sat slumped in a metal chair, his leather jacket looking out of place under the harsh fluorescent lights. Across from him, the two officers who had arrested him flipped through a file, their expressions unreadable. The older officer tapped a pen against the desk. Let's go over this again. You saw a blind woman with a service dog, and your first instinct was to kick the animal? The biker ran a hand over his face. I told you, I didn't know it was a service dog. It was just, in the way. The younger officer scoffed. It was on a harness. You'd have to be blind yourself to miss that. The biker's leg bounced nervously under the table. Look, I was pissed off, okay? Had a bad day. I wasn't thinking straight. That's not gonna hold up in court, the older officer said flatly. Especially since the dog you kicked is a decorated retired K9. Rex here has more commendations than you've got traffic tickets. He slid a photo across the table, Rex in his police vest, standing proudly beside his former handler. The biker's throat went dry. I didn't know. Doesn't matter what you knew, the younger officer cut in. You assaulted an animal trained and certified for duty. That's a felony. Plus, witnesses saw you take a swing at a civilian who tried to stop you. She leaned forward. You're looking at jail time, pal. Meanwhile, in a quieter corner of the station, the woman sat with Rex beside her, one hand resting on his back as a detective took her statement. The vet had confirmed bruised ribs but no permanent damage, physically, at least. Emotionally was another story. The detective, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, slid a cup of coffee toward her. I know this isn't easy. But your testimony is crucial. The woman nodded, her fingers tightening slightly in Rex's fur. He's never hesitated to protect me. Even in retirement. The detective smiled faintly. K9 instincts don't just turn off. She hesitated. The DA wants to throw the book at this guy. Between the assault charge and the cruelty to service animal statute, he's facing serious time. The woman was quiet for a moment. I don't want revenge. I just want him to understand what he did. That Rex isn't just a dog, he's the reason I can go outside without fear. Back in interrogation, the biker was starting to crack. What if I apologize? Pay the vet bills or something? The older officer shook his head. This isn't a fender bender. That dog's medical records show he served in narcotics detection and suspect apprehension. You're lucky all he did was hold your wrist. A new voice came from the doorway, the police chief, a grizzled man with salt and pepper hair. Rex took down an armed robber in 2019. Saved 2 officers' lives. He fixed the biker with a steel gaze. And you kicked him like he was a stray begging for scraps. The biker swallowed hard. For the first time, the weight of his actions truly hit him. This wasn't just about some random dog. He'd attacked a hero. Outside, the woman clipped Rex's leash back on, ready to head home. The man who'd helped her earlier, now introduced as a local mechanic, hesitated nearby. "You sure you're okay getting back?" She managed a small smile. "We'll be fine. But thank you, for everything." As they walked away, Rex's gait was steady, his head high. Bruised ribs wouldn't keep him from doing his job. And the law wouldn't let this slide. The courthouse was packed the morning of the hearing. Reporters clustered near the entrance, drawn by the viral story of the retired K-9 attacked while on duty with his blind owner. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and strong coffee, the weight of the law pressing down on everyone present. The biker sat at the defense table, his usual leather jacket replaced by an ill-fitting suit. His lawyer, a tired-looking public defender, shuffled through notes while shooting nervous glances at the prosecution's table. There, the district attorney stood tall beside the blind woman and Rex, who lay calmly at her feet, his intelligent eyes scanning the room out of habit. The judge, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair, entered, and the room fell silent. "This is a preliminary hearing for the charges of felony animal cruelty and assault on a service animal," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Prosecution, you may begin." The DA stood. "Your Honor, the defendant deliberately attacked a certified service animal, a retired police K-9, while it was assisting its visually impaired owner. Medical records confirm the dog suffered bruised ribs. Witnesses, including an off-duty officer, saw the defendant kick the animal unprovoked before attempting to assault a bystander who intervened." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge's mouth tightened. The defense lawyer stood quickly. "My client admits to losing his temper but maintains he didn't realize the dog was a service animal. He's willing to cover all medical expenses and complete community service." The DA scoffed. "With all due respect, Your Honor, this wasn't a moment of lost temper. This was a violent act against an animal trained to aid the disabled, an animal with a distinguished service record. The defendant's disregard for the law and decency warrants more than a slap on the wrist." The judge's gaze shifted to the blind woman. "Would the victim like to speak?" She stood, her hands resting lightly on the table for balance. Rex rose beside her, pressing against her leg in silent support. "Rex isn't just my dog," she said, her voice clear and steady. "He's my independence. Because of him, I can navigate the world without fear. When your own eyes don't work, you learn to trust other senses, and Rex has never let me down." She took a slow breath. "What happened that day didn't just hurt him. It shook my faith in the world." The courtroom was silent. Even the biker stared at the floor, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. Then, the judge spoke. "Given the severity of the charges and the defendant's apparent lack of remorse, I'm denying bail reduction. Trial will proceed in 4 weeks." The biker's head snapped up. 4 weeks in jail? For a dog? The judge's voice turned icy. "For assaulting a living being that serves this community with more honor than you've shown today." She banged her gavel. "Next case." Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. The blind woman ignored them, keeping one hand on Rex's harness as her mechanic friend guided her through the crowd. "You did great in there," he said quietly. She exhaled. "I just hope it's enough." Behind them, the biker was led away in cuffs, his cocky smirk long gone. For the first time, he looked scared. And Rex, ever vigilant, didn't even glance back. The morning of the trial dawned gray and heavy, the kind of weather that made people walk faster with their heads down. But inside the courthouse, the air was electric. Every seat in the gallery was filled, retired K-9 officers in uniform, local advocates for the disabled, even a few curious law students scribbling notes. The biker, now looking noticeably thinner after a month in county lockup, slumped at the defense table. His public defender had been replaced by a slick private attorney, paid for by his motorcycle club, rumors whispered. The new lawyer adjusted his expensive tie and shot a confident smirk toward the prosecution. The blind woman sat perfectly still in the front row, Rex at her feet. She wore a simple navy dress, her hands folded in her lap. Beside her, the mechanic from that fateful day clenched and unclenched his fists, his eyes locked on the biker. The judge entered, and the room rose. This trial will determine whether the defendant is guilty of felony animal cruelty and assault on a service animal, she said. Prosecution, call your first witness. The DA stood. The people call Officer Daniel Rivera. A broad-shouldered man in uniform walked to the stand. Rex's ears perked up instantly, his tail giving a single thump against the floor. The blind woman reached down to soothe him, but even she couldn't hide the small smile touching her lips. The officer placed his hand on the Bible. I was Rex's handler for 6 years, he said. He served in narcotics detection and suspect apprehension. Saved my life twice. He glanced at the biker, his voice hardening. Retired K-9s aren't just pets. They're officers. And attacking one is no different than attacking a cop in uniform. The defense attorney shot up. Objection. Prejudicial comparison. The judge waved him off. Overruled. The witness may continue. For 20 minutes, Officer Rivera detailed Rex's training, how he could detect drugs through concrete walls, how he'd taken down armed suspects without hesitation. By the time he stepped down, even the jury looked at Rex with newfound respect. The defense called their only witness, the biker himself. He took the stand, his voice surprisingly meek. I didn't know it was a cop dog, he insisted. I just saw some mutt blocking the sidewalk. The DA pounced. So you admit you saw the dog was leashed and harnessed? I guess. And you kicked it anyway? The biker shifted. I was having a bad day. The DA walked to the evidence table and lifted a file. Your bad day seems to be a pattern. He flipped it open. 3 prior arrests for assault. A restraining order from your ex-girlfriend. And, he paused dramatically, a sealed juvenile record for torturing neighborhood cats. The gallery erupted. The judge banged her gavel. The biker's face turned purple. That was years ago. The DA didn't blink. It seems you have a history of targeting the vulnerable. He turned to the jury. First small animals. Then women. Now a blind person's service dog. When does it end? The defense attorney objected loudly, but the damage was done. The jury looked at the biker like he was something they'd scraped off their shoes. During recess, the mechanic helped the blind woman guide Rex outside for fresh air. It's going well, he murmured. She shook her head. It's not over yet. As if on cue, a gruff voice called out behind them. That's him. That's the dog. They turned to see an elderly man in a veteran's cap hurrying toward them, his eyes bright. Rex's tail wagged furiously. You know Rex? The woman asked. The old man laughed. Know him? This hero sniffed out a bomb at the 4th of July parade 2 years back. He knelt with creaking knees to scratch Rex's ears. Whole crowd evacuated because of this boy. They never even put it in the papers, didn't want to panic folks. The mechanic whistled low. So he's not just a retired cop dog. He's a freaking hero. The old man nodded solemnly. And that punk in there kicked him? He spat on the pavement. Hope they bury him under the jail. The blind woman's fingers tightened on Rex's harness. Suddenly, the weight of the trial felt heavier. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about honor. The courtroom buzzed as the trial entered its final phase. The biker's expensive lawyer had called for a recess after the bomb-sniffing revelation, scrambling to adjust his strategy. But the damage was irreversible. Every juror now looked at Rex with something approaching reverence. The blind woman sat straighter than before, her chin lifted. The mechanic beside her kept glaring at the defense table, where the biker slouched lower with each passing minute. His cocky smirk had vanished, replaced by a sheen of sweat on his forehead. The judge called for order. "Prosecution, your closing statement." The DA stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case isn't complicated. The defendant saw a blind woman with her service dog and chose violence. Not just any dog, a decorated K-9 officer who has saved lives. A hero who now helps a disabled citizen navigate the world safely." He walked toward the jury box, his voice dropping. That kick wasn't just cruelty. It was an attack on the very idea of decency. He paused beside Rex, who lay quietly, his intelligent eyes tracking the room. "You've heard testimony about this dog's service record. About how he's been shot at, fought criminals, even detected explosives to protect civilians. And now? He wears new scars, bruises from the defendant's boot." The DA's voice hardened. "Send a message. No one gets to hurt those who protect us and walk away." The defense attorney's closing was desperate. "My client made a mistake. He didn't know the dog's history. Should a moment of anger really ruin a man's life?" The judge's gavel cut through the murmurs. "Jury will deliberate." The wait stretched for hours. In the courthouse cafeteria, the mechanic bought the blind woman a coffee. "They're taking a long time," he muttered. She stroked Rex's head. "Good. It means they're thinking." Nearby, Officer Rivera sat with the old veteran, both men glaring at any reporters who wandered too close. The air felt charged, like lightning might strike at any moment. Then the bailiff appeared in the doorway. "Verdict's in." The courtroom felt colder when they returned. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." He unfolded the paper. "On the charge of felony animal cruelty, guilty. On the charge of assault on a service animal, guilty." The gallery erupted. The biker's chair screeched as he jumped up. "This is bullshit." The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "Sit down before I hold you in contempt." She turned to the bailiff. "Take him into custody. Sentencing will be. I ain't going to jail over a damn dog." What happened next unfolded in slow motion. The biker lunged, not toward the exit, but toward the blind woman. Rex moved faster than anyone thought possible for an animal with bruised ribs. A snarl ripped through the air as Rex intercepted the attack, his teeth closing around the biker's forearm just enough to stop him cold. The bailiff and two officers tackled the man to the ground as Rex released his grip and stepped back, positioning himself firmly between his owner and the threat. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. The judge's voice cut through the noise. "Add assault on a disabled person and attempted escape to his charges. Get him out of my courtroom." As officers dragged the struggling biker away, he locked eyes with the blind woman. For the first time, real fear flashed across his face, not of prison, but of the quiet woman who hadn't flinched once during his outburst. Because behind her, Rex stood like a sentinel, his chest rumbling with a warning growl that said more clearly than words. "Try that again. I dare you." Outside later, reporters swarmed, but Officer Rivera and the mechanic formed a protective barrier around the blind woman and Rex. "You okay?" the mechanic asked, his voice rough with anger. She nodded, running her hands over Rex's sides. "We both are." Officer Rivera knelt beside his former partner. "Good work, boy." He glanced up at the woman. "He's still got it." She smiled faintly. "He always will." The DA pushed through the crowd. "Maximum sentence is 5 years. With today's little stunt?" He grinned. "He'll serve every day of it." As they walked away from the courthouse, the blind woman's grip on Rex's harness was lighter than it had been in weeks. The mechanic hesitated, then blurted out, "Can I buy you both dinner? To celebrate?" She tilted her head, considering. Rex gave a soft woof of approval. "We'd like that," she said. And for the first time since the attack, she laughed. 6 months later, the first snow of winter dusted the streets as the blind woman and Rex walked their familiar route. Rex moved with ease now, his ribs long-heeled, his gait steady as he guided his owner around icy patches. The mechanic, now a constant presence in their lives, fell into step beside them, carrying 2 steaming coffee cups. "They put up the plaque today," he said, handing her one. She breathed in the rich aroma before taking a sip. "At the K9 Training Center?" "Right in the lobby." Rex, dedicated service dog and retired police K9. "A true hero." He chuckled. They misspelled retired, but the sentiment's there. She smiled, reaching down to scratch Rex's ears. "He doesn't need a plaque. He knows what he is." The state prison loomed gray in the distance, but the biker wasn't thinking about freedom. He sat in the prison library, poring over law books, his jumpsuit hanging loose on his frame. The other inmates gave him wide berth, not because of his tough biker persona, but because of the article taped above his bunk. The local paper's headline said it all: "Disgraced biker loses appeal, 5-year sentence upheld for attack on retired police K9." A trustee dropped a new stack of mail on the table. "More fan mail," he sneered. The biker ignored him, flipping open a dog-eared copy of service animal protection laws. His appeals had failed, but he'd discovered something unexpected in his research, a genuine interest in the very laws he'd broken. Maybe, just maybe, he could do something right for once. Back in the neighborhood, the blind woman unlocked the door to her newly expanded business, a small braille transcription service she'd started with the settlement money from the lawsuit against the Bikers Motorcycle Club. The mechanic followed her inside, Rex padding between them. "Got another client inquiry today," he said, flipping on the lights. "School district wants their textbooks converted." She set down her bag, her face alight with pride. "We'll need to hire help." "We?" His voice cracked slightly. She turned toward him, her expression softening. "If you're still interested in being more than just my coffee supplier." Rex, ever the good judge of character, leaned against the mechanic's legs and wagged his tail. The mechanic swallowed hard. "I'd like that. A lot." That evening, as snowflakes danced outside, the three of them sat together, the woman at her new braille embosser, the mechanic repairing a chair nearby, and Rex stretched contentedly between them, his paws twitching as he dreamed of chasing bad guys. Somewhere far away, a prison guard chuckled at the sight of a tough-looking inmate reading guide dog training manuals. And the world, for once, felt perfectly balanced.